I want to talk to Mark Mix. He's with the National Right to Work Committee, and usually we talk to Mark about things like right to work states where we've made amazing progress in America by telling people you don't have to belong to a union in some states just to work at a union workplace. But now we've got a major strike going on. It happens to involve the company that manufactures the single most, I think it's still the single greatest amount of money that America gets in exports, and that's airplanes. It may be that chips are close, but airplanes certainly are a big category. And there's one big airplane company, and it's called Boeing, and its workers went on strike today. 33,000 machinists who said a 25% raise is not nearly enough, so they're going on strike. And I wanted to talk, Mark, about the implications of that. Mark Mix, welcome back.
Lars, good to be with you. Yeah, this is a pretty serious issue, not only for our export business, but also for the economy. Boeing plays a pretty big role in the economy of the United States, notwithstanding the strength in exporting that 737 aircraft for sure.
I mean, you got, what, hundreds of thousands of workers, not just the machinists, but everybody else on both coasts of America. And I'm wondering, when these workers look at the company, they've had tremendous numbers of PR, if you want to describe it as PR, but airplanes that have parts fly off in midair, a Starliner spaceship that's stuck at the International Space Station till last weekend when it came home empty because the engineers or NASA didn't trust it to get them back on the ground safely. And the company, which has had slow production and their revenue is way off, they're bleeding money right now, and they say this is the perfect time to demand 40% more in our paychecks?
Yeah, that's right, Lars. Boeing has not reported a profit since 2018, and I think their core operating losses, according to reports that I've read, are about $33 billion through the second quarter of this year. Their credit rating has been downgraded to near junk. But yet there is a demand for a 40% increase. And frankly, the union officials who negotiated had a tentative agreement with Boeing that gave them some of these, a 25% increase over 4 years. And they said it was the best contract they'd negotiated in their history, and yet the workers rejected it. Now, obviously, the workers have the right to reject that, but going out on strike at a company that's teetering like Boeing is dangerous, I think, not only for those workers, but also, as you mentioned, for the export and the economy of the United States.
Well, and Mark, one of the other things, because it didn't get as much attention, usually when reporters cover stories, they talk about the salary and the benefits and as though that's the be-all and end-all. And I've had too many people over the years say, no, it's the work rules, which are the details about how workers are worked and breaks and mandatory, how many people you have to have on the job. Boeing apparently made one concession to the union that I was kind of stunned by. I mean, all of us are a little bit, or at least a lot of us, I am worried about the impact of AI, artificial intelligence, both for scam artists, national security, and everything else. Yeah. But apparently in the case of Boeing, they said to the union, even if we find ways to make a more efficient production line, that maintenance can be assigned to AI and AI, not that a little robot is going to go out and fix the plane, but that they might be able to find ways to gain efficiency, that they promised the union, but even if we find more efficiencies, which are usually in using fewer people to do the same job, we will not fire anybody. We won't let anybody go. And I thought, that kind of reminded me of the railroads when they went from wood and coal to fire locomotives to oil. And the union said, well, what are you going to do with the guy who's the fireman who used to shovel the coal? And they said, you will keep him on the job and keep him getting a paycheck, even though he doesn't have anything to do anymore. And they managed to do that. And this sounds like a modern example of that, where the workers, and maybe not just at Boeing, are going to say, if AI makes the job more efficient and we can do it with fewer people, you, the company, must promise that you won't lay anybody off.
Yeah, right. And there's another demand that was on the table that said basically any new airplane had to be built in a unionized factory. Boeing had a big fight with the IAM over the 787 Dreamliner that ended up in South Carolina in a non-union facility. That's the one Boeing facility that's non-union. And one of the demands on the table was that they had to commit to building the next aircraft in a unionized facility. So there's a compulsory unionism arrangement here. You can't force the workers in South Carolina to pay union dues or fees, but in Washington State and up there in the Pacific Northwest, they have the ability to do that. So that's why we want to protect their revenue stream as well. But you're right about that. that, Lars, the idea of automation, that's something we're dealing with on the ports at the West Coast. You and I have talked about that in the past. Now we're dealing with on the East Coast ports about there can be no automation making the port system more efficient and more effective in the sense of processing products. There seems to be some of that argument here, and that's just untenable for a company that's really on the financial edge here. I think people need to understand that.
Well, and Mark, it sounds like when you mentioned compulsory unionism, if the plant in South Carolina says, hey, the folks in Washington State have negotiated a new contract, and if you want the work to come to South Carolina, all of you have to join the union. Is it not going to boil down to that? They'll say, yeah, you can work in the non-union factory, but we won't be building the next airplane. Or you can work in the factory that's building the next airplane, but you all have to join the union. It sounds like it's a way for the union to force a non-union state, a right-to-work state, into telling its workers either join the union or your job is going away.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the question of the 787 aircraft is in jeopardy right now. This is, Renton produces the 737, the 767, the 777, and the 767 cargo plane. And so that's where the real question is right now. I suspect that the plant in South Carolina is operating today. I don't know any different. I haven't heard any different.
No, I'm just saying that Mark, when the company says, hey, we've got the next iteration of airplanes, and the guys and gals in South Carolina say, oh, good, that's going to mean more hours for me, and they say, no, it won't unless you join the union. And because they'll say, yeah, you can stay non-union if you want to, but that next project is not coming here. It's going to stay in a union state like Washington State. It would be a way effectively of forcing them by saying, yeah, you've still got the job on the 787, no problem with that. But when the next big airplane comes along and the 787, eventually will go to the junkyard, I mean, you'll stop making them and you'll make something else. If you want to make that something else, you're going to have to join the union.
Yeah, well, that would be kind of illegal in South Carolina, but we've seen that before. The Ford companies, GM's tried that with their relocation in the right-to-work state, saying, yeah, we're going to sign a card check agreement with the UAW. So, yeah, it's very possible that the IAM will leverage Boeing in that way, saying, hey, you've got to guarantee that, folks down there in South Carolina in the right-to-work states will be, quote-unquote, forced to join a union, even though you can't force them to join, but you can force them to pay a non-right-to-work state. So I suspect that'll be part of the debate, Lars. We'll be there for those employees that might face that kind of intimidation and coercion to help them represent their rights in the workplace, for sure.
Okay, last quick question, quick answer. Is this going to push Boeing over the edge?
Boy, it sure sounds like they're tipping right now. I'm not sure. I hope not, and America should hope not, and we should hope not, but we'll see what they do.
I mean, $33 billion in debt. Got problems up the wazoo with, production quality and everything else. And then the union workers say, we got to get paid this much or we're not going to do it. It sounds like they might just wipe out their own jobs. That's Mark Mix, the president of the National Right to Work Committee.